Welcome to the Sisterhood of Sweat. I'm here today with Dr. Nadine Macaluso. Dr. Nadine Macaluso is a licensed marriage and family therapist in private practice. She received her master's in counseling psychology and doctorate in depth psychology with an emphasis on somatic psychotherapy from Pacifica Graduate Institute in California. She completed a 2-year postdoctoral training in evidence-based psychotherapeutic treatment method, the neuroaffective relational model, NARM, N-A-R-M, designed to treat complex trauma. Combining her professional training with her personal experience of being married to the infamous Wolf of Wall Street, Dr. Nay is now a leading expert in trauma bonds, shame relationships, complex trauma, and dark tetrad personalities. Nadine currently has over 500,000 social media followers. Today, we talked about escaping a toxic relationship, the variad of dark personalities, personality disorders, how to spot red flags when you're dating, intermittent reinforcement, trauma bonds, therapy, surrounding yourself with support, and so much more. This was such a great topic, I think, and just to me, it's going to help thousands of women out there. So I am excited. I was so excited to have Dr. Nadine on. And if you have watched the movie Wolf of Wall Street, that's who we're talking about. She was married to him. And I hope you guys really enjoy the episode. Let me know what you think, what resonates with you. And as always, you guys, I hope that something in here really helps to make your life enriched. Without further ado, we're going to dive into this episode with Nadine. I am so excited to welcome Nadine Macaluso to the Sisterhood of Sweat today.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. I'm glad we could do this.
Well, Nadine, I listened to you on Impact Theory and I was just blown away, just right out of the gate by your story. For everybody listening, she was married to the Wolf of Wall Street.
Correct.
And there's a movie, and if you haven't seen it, it probably doesn't even do the version of what you went through justice.
Right.
I would imagine. And truth is always stranger than fiction.
Always.
Right. And so I am so excited to have you on. I think this is a very important topic to talk to women, to tell your story, and just, I mean, you've become a psychologist, all of these things. And so let's just start at the beginning with your story for the listeners.
Yeah. So yes, I was married to the Wolf of Wall Street, and that movie was made about my life with him. But my story, begins many, many years back. I grew up in Brooklyn, and I was raised by a single mother in Brooklyn in the 70s, which was a lot of fun. It was a fun time. No internet, no social media, right? Kids just played on the street. And I grew up in a very psychological home. My mom was reading Sigmund Freud and Carl Jung, and it was a very peaceful, great home life. But as life went on, right, I realized you need money to live. As we do, right? When you stop being a child and you become a young adult. And so since I was raised by a single mom, I was really on my own financially from about 17 on. And so I became a model in New York City simply to make money. There was nothing about modeling that I found glamorous. It's a very strange career, honestly, I think. But I needed it to make money. And so I was living in Brooklyn Heights with my best friend, modeling traveling around the world, having a great time. And as the movie The Wolf of Wall Street depicts, I went to my ex-husband's house for a big party. And I walked in with my boyfriend, and as soon as we walk in, I was like, oh, these people are all so strange. But I didn't realize they were Quaaludes. I didn't know they were all on Quaaludes.
Okay.
So I didn't even know what that was back
Oh,
then,
right. Yeah.
right? I didn't know. And then as the movie depicts, someone did expose themselves to me, which was horrifying. And I said, we got to get the hell out of here. These people are crazy. We left. That's really the truth.
So you had to get out of there, but how did you then end up
Yeah,
getting hooked up with the Wolf of Wall
well,
Street?
I know. So what happened was that I guess, I left, but he was, like, oh, I got to get that girl, I guess. I had no idea he was thinking that. And so our second meeting after that was he paid a friend of his $15,000 in the stock market to meet me for her to set up a date. And so she kept calling me and saying, you got to go out with this guy. And he showed up, sauntered out of his Testarossa and his cowboy boots, sat down next to me, and we started just to have this great conversation. I'm from Brooklyn, he's from Queens, and we just really got along. And then he drove me home, and then I'm like, maybe this guy likes me. But I just hopped out of the car and said, I'm listed under this name. Find me if you want me. And then he sent the next day, like the movie shows, 1,200 square feet of flowers into an 800 square foot apartment. And I was just like, I came home and I was like, what's happening? And I was actually throwing my girlfriend a party, and everybody's like, you didn't sleep with him? I'm like, sleep with him? I didn't even kiss him. I didn't know it was a date. And then I really didn't see him for 6 months because I was traveling and modeling and doing all that sort of stuff. And he was married. And then about 6 months later, we bumped into each other at the gym. I'm just looking at your sisterhood of sweat. So I was like, yeah, at the gym, that happens.
So at the gym, you can meet people.
You
I
can
bet,
meet people.
right? I bet you were, that almost sounded like a movie, like Every Girl's Dream. The man buys her,
Right.
you probably saw Cary Grant do it for Doris Day or something. They buy this huge apartment full of flowers, but maybe did you feel it was a little weird?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I just thought, of course, it was like an over the top grand gesture that I had never experienced before. Um, yeah, I definitely did think it was weird.
But
Definitely.
it felt good, right?
Yeah, and it felt good, but now we know it's love bombing. Back
Yeah.
then, all these many years later ago, nobody was talking about love bombing, narcissism, and trauma bonds. That wasn't in the vernacular. That wasn't in the zeitgeist. And so then we met again at the gym, and we went out on a date, and then that was it.
That was it. You went
Fell
out on a date,
madly in love, fell madly head over heels in love.
and he was married.
Yeah, he was married, and he said to me he was separated, he was getting divorced, right? And
Mhm.
he did have a separate apartment. And so I believed him. Now, of course, I'm 22 years old. Of course, I should have been more curious and inquisitive, right, than I was. But I believed him. And then 6 months later, we were engaged, and 6 months later, we were married.
Oh my gosh, he moved fast.
Wham bam.
Wham, bam, and probably not thank you, ma'am, but like
Right.
you
Right. Definitely not.
probably not. So you're like that's a whirlwind romance right there. And you're 22 years old. How much older was he?
He's only 5 years older than me. He was 28.
But still,
But still,
he probably been around a little bit.
yes.
So at this point, have you seen any signs, any red flags? Did you
Yes.
notice anything at that
Yes.
point?
Yes. Now, again, I had no idea that there were even red flags in the world, right? I believed all these Disney movies, like someday your prince is going to come and he's going to rescue you and he's going to save you and you're going to be madly in love forever. And So, but what had happened was the dominating, intimidating, threatening behavior began right from the beginning. And he started to threaten me. If you're not going to marry me, I'm not going to date you. If you're not going to have kids, I'm not going to marry you. Now I'm saying it very calmly, but it was not said to me like that. And I would fight back because I didn't want to get married. My parents got divorced when I was 6, and when to get married and when to have children are really big decisions. But when you're with a person like that, it's their way or the highway. And so those were some huge red flags. But then I was just like, oh, he just loves me.
So you're in it,
Yeah.
you are starting to see the signs, but it's still fine. When did it start really, like, when do you feel like you started wondering what you got yourself in for?
Oh, I would say the night before my wedding. I was wondering what I got myself in for because got pregnant. And I ended up having 2 miscarriages, but I did a video about this for social media the night before our wedding, like he's wasted, and I'm just furious. I'm like, wait, you want to get married, you want to have kids, and you're not being a partner with me, right? But now I'm in it. There's 200 people coming to our wedding, and but then as the relationship ensued, the drug addiction and the controlling possessive behavior really got me like, oh my God. And that's when I got myself right into therapy.
And you got right into therapy.
Right into therapy because I realized this was, I could never manage this on my own. I was smart
Okay.
enough to know that.
Yeah, that's super smart because so many of us are so naive, or we might be following some type of model that our parents
Right,
maybe did, where
right.
you're long suffering and you make it work and you
Yeah.
can't leave, or you got to be the good one. And
Yeah, no, I got myself right into therapy, and I do attribute that to my mother, right? Being a psychological person and being open to that sort of experience. So I got myself into therapy, and I would say therapy saved me. Didn't make me leave him, but I think it allowed me to stay somewhat sane during the marriage. And because his drug addiction, and as most trauma bonds, what happens, the abuse escalates, right? It doesn't usually go back. It
right,
usually escalates.
gets
And that,
worse.
again, that's really what continued to happen. And then you have babies, and then you're financially dependent, and then your families are intertwined, right?
Yes. And so they take their mask off, so to speak. Right. So
Right.
what, not the like before, is the love bombing then to be able to be like, that's how they suck you in then?
Correct. Correct.
And how can somebody out there recognize, what would you consider love bombing? How can we recognize when it's being done to us?
Yeah, so love bombing, it doesn't just have to be big gifts and grand gestures. It can also be just an incredible amount of attention and adoration right away, right? Like nobody's your soulmate after 2 weeks. That's just not reality. I mean, it might feel good. And I was saying that if it feels too good to be true, it probably is. And so
And
trust your gut. Like if it's too much adoration, too much intensity, if it's happening at too fast of a pace, what aren't they wanting you to see behind the scenes?
okay. So it kind of, you are taking it at face value
Sure.
especially at 22,
Right.
and feeling adored
Correct.
and cherished. And who doesn't want that? I mean, everybody wants to be adored and cherished.
Yeah.
But then there's the other side of the coin. If somebody is doing that, like basically, I heard recently, if somebody feeds you, they can starve you too.
Yeah.
So
I like that.
I was just like thinking about that so much. So that when women get in these relationships, they're the dominance comes right away, almost like it's something they want to control. They want power and control.
Correct.
And would you say, what were the areas that he wanted power and control in? What were some of the
Yeah.
things?
Yeah, and that's really important point. At the bottom of the trauma bond is the part the perpetrator always wants power and control. So he said to me, quit modeling. You don't need the money. What's $3,000 a day? Which I thought it was a lot of money back then and even now. And I was so quit your job. Where do you live? I want to live in the city. Nope, swooped me out to the suburbs, right? Who am I hanging out with? Those were like the three main things, like my work, where I lived, and who I'm spending my time with that I can think of right off the top of my head. And then, of course, when to get married, when to have kids, right? But I mean, as our life developed. And what happens too is that because they can have a lot of rage, um, you're almost anticipating what they want to control. And so I'm like distorting myself and managing him the whole time, right? To not feel the rage.
Of course, it's gaslighting yourself.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Because I don't want to deal with that tsunami of rage. So I'm just like saying, if I do this, he'll be upset. So I won't do it. If I do that, he'll be upset. So I won't do it. Right. So I did a video about this where when I lived in suburbia, I went to take golf lessons because he played golf. I want to be a good wife. And I said, okay, I'm gonna go get Jordan a sandwich because I'm running ahead of time. Let me stop. But I was a little late because I did that. And as soon as I come in, he's like, you're fucking the golf pro. I'm like, what? I'm madly in love. I just got married to you. Right? And it was so shocking to me, right? So, but
Right,
that fear gets instilled to dominate and control you.
right. Okay. So they know that they're doing it. And what it is you begin feeling intimidated
Right.
and fearful of doing things that it's like taking your autonomy away because you're questioning your judgment. You're afraid to do what your natural instinct would be to do. And
Exactly.
you're getting falsely accused of things.
Right.
And he knows you're not doing those things.
I would assume so, or like I believe too, is that they project a lot onto you what they're doing.
Okay.
Oh,
So,
yeah, I say a lot of times when you're in this relationship, whatever they're accusing you of, trust me, it's an admission.
yeah, because they're punishing you for what they did, right?
Yeah.
Did you feel like you ever were getting punished during the relationship?
Oh, sure. Yeah. Like if you don't do things exactly the way he wants it, right? The rage would come. So now in some trauma bonds, a lot of people will stonewall or withdraw love or do the silent treatment. He wasn't a big silent treatment person, but that's the opposite way to control somebody. His was just full throttle rage.
The rage is, I mean, that alone, you're a lady, he's a man. I
Yeah.
mean, you already right there are feeling afraid and intimidated. And I think so many people get stuck in that fear. They're stuck in the relationship because of so many things. Let's say you didn't get out. Let's say you've been in it for, I don't know, 20 years and your
Yeah.
kids and your family
Yes.
and they control the money. Did he ever threaten to cut off your
Oh,
finances?
I'm sure. I'm sure he did. I
Yeah.
mean, I don't even remember that, but I'm sure that was, if it wasn't said, it was certainly implied.
So how did you get the courage? I mean, when did you realize that, oh my gosh, like I mean, it takes a lot of courage to get out of a relationship like that. How did you find the courage and when did you realize you needed to get out?
Yeah, in my book, I write about the last straw, but I had three last straws because this was a special one. So the first one was when I said to him, I am going to leave this marriage unless you go get help for your drug addiction. And he went crazy. And that's the first time he got really violent with me, as depicted in the movie. But the chronology was different than the movie. And he tried to take my daughter, and I went after him and he kicked me down the stairs. And like the movie shows, he drove us both kind of, not just her, but both of us into a garage door, but we were okay. So that was the first one. And that was towards the end of the relationship. Now, he did get sober, which was great, but then he came home to us. And the whole reason he was getting sober was to come home to us. So I was like, oh shit, now how am I gonna leave him, right? But then my second straw was when I spoke to him about everything that I had endured with him. And we were having sushi, and I said, that was really hard what I went through. And I went through, described everything. And he just looked at me and went, it wasn't that bad.
He minimized it.
And at that moment, something inside of me closed. And I didn't know the word callousness then, but that's really callous. And
Mhm.
that's what felt just so incredibly insensitive. So my heart closed. And then my third straw was when he got arrested, which was about a year after we had become violent with me, because I knew I was safe because he had an ankle bracelet. So
Oh,
yeah,
see, okay. So you knew you were safe, and that is really far out there.
yeah,
And so you're talking about the callousness,
yeah,
which would be a lack of empathy, right?
correct. 100%.
So he didn't have any kind of empathy for what you went through. Um, do you feel that he had like a godlike complex, like thinking like, like a lot of them do. I mean, they
Uh,
just think that they're all that and they know, they're
yeah, I
really
think,
insecure, but they
yeah,
appear to
I
be.
think he felt entitled
Yeah,
and
that's what I'm getting at.
superior, right? And so I think that's part of that personality,
Hmm.
but the lack of remorse. So I say
Right,
this often, that not having remorse to me was almost more painful than what had happened.
right.
And so those three things, and I was like, I'm done.
Hmm. Yeah.
We're done. We're done. And so I left.
So you were done. You get out. Tell us what did you plan that? I mean, how did you plan your escape? How did you get out and start
Yeah.
over?
Well, like I say to a lot of my patients, I said, I was lucky he got arrested, because now the playing field's even. He doesn't have all the power anymore, right? So luckily during my marriage, I had started a little business, and I had made maternity clothing, and I had a store and an internet and a catalog. So I had a little business of my own. And then I was living on Long Island and dating again, which was so much fun, and feeling so free, and really coming back to myself. I checked myself into the Karen Foundation, and they had a week-long program called Breakthrough, where I really learned about myself, and I didn't know I could say no. I didn't know if I could have boundaries. Because remember, back then, 25 years ago, nobody was talking about this.
Right, right.
Right. So I got really educated. I stayed in therapy, had a lot of really good self-care. Don't trust me, it was hard. I was afraid. It was hard, but I had two little babies.
Yeah, you don't want them going through that.
I had no choice. Like, you have to go through. And remember, I was raised by a single mom. So I had her strength too, right? She was there also supporting me, which was huge. And then about 2 years later, I was still working. I met my current husband, and he was in the garment business too. And he had three little girls, similar ages. And I moved my kids to California, and we just left it all behind. So I thought,
Oh, no.
right? Because then there's a book and a movie, right?
Right.
Thought, okay, we're done with this chapter. And Jordan and I were getting along good. My current relationship, I was really falling in love with my current husband now of 25 years. And we're married for 23, together 25. And then I was like, okay, life is going to start over again. And then that was around 31, 32. And then at 39, I said, I'm going to go back to school to be a therapist, because I knew that therapy had saved me.
Therapy saved you and you wanted to help other people.
Yeah.
But don't you think it was also healing for you to go to therapy, through therapy and become a therapist?
Yes. Yes. And I stayed in therapy throughout my 20s, throughout my 30s. I never stopped, because I just knew what a resource it was for me as a woman, as a person, as a mother, as a friend, right? As a
Right.
partner.
Hmm.
I mean, to only spend an hour a week talking about your life, when you think about all the other things we do for many more hours, it's not that long.
Right. So when you were leaving, you, I think women experience this so much, that trauma bond. And I don't think people really understand the pull of the trauma bond and what it is. Can you kind of
Sure.
explain that for the
Yeah,
listeners?
so the trauma bond has to have, so a trauma bond is a toxic, dysfunctional relationship, right, between two emotionally attached people. It doesn't have to just be between lovers, but in my book, it's about lovers. It can be between parents, coworkers, friends, etc. And so it has to have two conditions: the power imbalance. One person has the power and they abuse that power, right?
Mm-hmm.
Power over you. And
Right.
the second thing is intermittent reinforcement, which
Mm-hmm.
is what we talked about, where they're, 70% of the time they're cruel, controlling, abusive, but that 30% of the time that they're love bombing, generous, and helpful. And so those very extreme behaviors that they have create very extreme feelings in us. And that's actually what creates the bond, is the intermittent reinforcement. And yeah, it can be very hard to leave because of that 30%, hope is the hook. Maybe they're going to get better, or they tell you they're never going to do it again, right? And so you just keep coming back to it with hope that this thing is going to change, or you're going to go back to the way it was in the beginning, but that doesn't happen. So that's why it can be very hard to leave. Now, for me, I had endured so much that trauma bond was broken. But for many women that I'm working with, I
Mm-hmm.
have to hold space, to just hold space until they're ready to leave the trauma.
Mm-hmm. And the intermittent reinforcement,
Yeah.
like they did that study with, what was it, mice,
Yeah.
where,
Yeah. With animals. Yeah.
and so it's a real reality that if you like what took their food away and then you give it back, or you ring the bell, like they start to salivate.
Yeah. What the research showed was that when the animal trainers used intimate reinforcement, the animals bonded to the trainer 230% more than just straight kindness. And when I read that statistic, I was like, thank you. This is what it is. It's from an old book, I think in the 60s or 70s. Um, and so I was like, okay, it's starting to make sense. And that's why I wrote the book, to destigmatize the victim.
Well, and then you have people that may, it can relate back to, however, it doesn't have to, but it can relate back to, maybe they wanted love and approval
Of
and
course.
they wanted something. So they're in this relationship, the person withholds, but then they
Yes.
give it to you and then they take it away again. And so it's very like mind games, like it's psychological for sure.
It's psychological warfare. Yes. Yes.
And we're not expecting that when we are going into this thinking it's a fairy tale romance. I'm Cinderella. My
Right.
prince has come, and
Right.
and I know you spoke about he would buy you a horse, or
Yeah. 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 Right. So like we'd have a huge fight. Then the next day I'd look up and there'd be a horse in my driveway because I used to horseback ride, right? So, and then you're just like, which one is it? Do you love me or hate me? And do I love or hate you? Like, is this relationship good or bad? And so you're just totally confused. There's just all of this internal conflict inside that happens.
isn't that part of what they do? They destabilize you.
Yeah.
It's this, you never know.
You never know.
Yeah.
That's, yeah, that's why it's not a cycle of abuse. That's why it's intermittent, because you never know when it's coming. And that's the real destabilizing thing. Because I could just do something totally normal, like get a sandwich,
Hmm.
and be blown out of the water,
Hmm. Right.
right? So that's the destabilizing piece.
Now, I know, like, I've read that they constantly make you feel like you're doing something wrong, or nothing is good enough.
Right.
And what is that all about?
Well, they are the eternal victim. So even though they are the perpetrator of the abuse, they blame you for everything, and they're the eternal victim because they also want to elicit empathy out of you. And so so like here they are being abusive and controlling and dominating, but yet they pretend like they're the ones that are getting hurt all the time, which is another mind game.
Do they even know what they're doing?
I mean, I think we have to just get into one of their brains to really figure out. I'd like to do a Freaky Friday with one of them.
Oh my gosh. Oh, wouldn't that be crazy? Oh my
That'd be
God.
crazy.
So somebody finds themselves in this mess, and I was reading your book, and you're talking about different personality types,
Yes,
and I think that that's worthy of going over for people
yes,
out there.
yes,
But one that really interested me because it's your kind of you called him the pathological lover, the PL.
yes.
So can you kind of go over these?
Yeah, yeah. So I call him the pathological lover because pathological means mentally unwell. And I believe that anybody that will harm, exploit, betray, and use someone they love to get their needs met for money, power, pleasure, and status is mentally unwell. And so they have different layers. They can have narcissism, they can have psychopathy, they can have Machiavellianism, sadism. They usually have impulsivity. They have a compulsive process disorder, right? Sex or addiction. They can have drug addiction. They can have a mood disorder, bipolar or depression. So they're a very multi-layered individual, and each one has their own perfect set of dark traits. And that's why they're so tricky to figure out. It took me forever, and I have my doctorate and I've lived with it, right?
And
It,
so many people are fooled by it.
oh yeah, and they're because also they can be very charming and charismatic and
And
extroverted con men.
that's
So
how they reel you in, though.
it's how they reel you in, yeah.
Hmm.
So that's why in chapter 2, the title is He Twisted or Tender? Because
You're like, which one is the real? I mean,
right.
with my ex-husband, it was Jekyll and Hyde.
Yeah, yeah. Now I call him Romeo and Dirty John.
I mean, I realized myself finally, because
Right.
the question, when you say twisted or tender, mine was, is he Jekyll or Hyde? And I finally realized he's Jekyll,
That's right.
he's Hyde, so he can be Jekyll.
Right.
And it really was an awakening when I realized the tears when I called the police and they were, big, tall like him, 6'4". And
Yeah.
they're standing on each side of the door, and he put on this act pleading, crying, please, please, what did I do, what did I, like he had done nothing, and wanted me to put my ring back on. And I just remember seeing him do this whole histrionics act for the
Yeah.
policeman. And I was in the bedroom of my son, and I saw his face in the mirror,
Mm,
and it went from that crying histrionic to that that
yeah.
smile that he'd gotten away with something.
Yeah.
And that did it for me. I was
Yeah.
like, oh my gosh, how many times have I been manipulated like by those
And
crocodile tears?
I'm sure many times because you're a good person.
You don't realize you're being manipulated.
Right.
And so this, I think, a lot of women go through. They're hooked to hope, and
Yeah.
they they want what they saw in the beginning.
Correct.
So how do you unhook, this is terrible, but how do you unhook them from hope that
Yeah.
these people are going to change?
Right. So first of all, if they come to me, then I know they're getting ready, right? Because then they've heard about me and they know what I do. And a lot of times when they first come, they'll tell me their experience and then they'll say, "Is this abuse? You sure this is abuse, right, Dr. Nate?" And I'll validate them. and I might have to validate them for a long time, right? And I always say the choice to leave is theirs. My sweet poor therapist, she sat with me for 7 years every single Monday at 1 p.m. And so I sit there with them till they're ready and I educate them and validate them. I educate them about their personality traits, their attachment patterns. We work on their strengths. We build up their strengths. We come up with a strategy. We don't, if, the one thing is don't ever let them see you coming. Now they have to wear the mask and pretend because there's no use in wasting conversation on this person anymore. And if they weren't nice to you when you were married to them, what do you think, or with them, what do you think they're going to be like once you tell them you're going to leave? It's going to be World War III. So I'm empowering them, educating them, validating them behind the scenes. And then we're planning this exit strategy or the escape. And then they escape. And it's not always smooth, but if they get to me from the beginning, I can help them a lot. And women, and they're strong and they're beautiful and they can do it. They can
And
do
when
it.
they leave,
Yeah,
do, do I think having you in their corner is a big
big thing.
accolade, because don't people go back and it's worse?
Yeah, they can go back. And again, if they go back, there's no shame. I always say to them, if you come in next week and tell me I can't do it, I'm like, I'm here with you. I understand the internal confusion that you feel. And but a lot of times they're stronger than they know. They just need the right support and we get them resourced with the right attorneys if they're if they need to get divorced, there are divorce coaches that I'm connected with. And yeah, and again, post-separation abuse is real. So it doesn't mean the abuse ends, especially if you have to go to court with somebody, even after you leave, it's very real. But again, I teach them about DARVO, right? Which is when you leave a perpetrator, they'll deny everything you accuse them of. They'll attack you and say you did it to them because they're always reversing the victim and offender, right? So we work on gray rocking, we work on different tactics to help them do it. And sure
Yeah,
enough, they can do it. Again, doesn't mean it's easy, but they can do it.
they can do it. And then they wonder, what was I thinking? Why was I there so long? I know it's probably a little bit of that.
Yeah,
Because you wake
yeah,
up out after you
yeah.
get out. I know I certainly did after I got out of my marriage. I certainly woke up to, and then you feel the anger. You go through so many emotions. That's why I think counseling is good, or being part of some type of group where people are in that similar
Correct,
circumstance.
correct. Yeah.
Now with when you are with, like, I guess a narcissist or somebody that has these personality disorders, talk to us about the devaluation and discarding phase.
Yeah, so right, for some women or people, whoever it is in this relationship, they don't get to leave. They will get the whole relationship gets devalued. So, I mean, really, after the first 3 months, the devaluing starts, even if it's more covert and a little quieter than how it ramps up. So that really starts from the beginning. But the discard is just what it says, I'm done with you. I have no more use for you. You are an object to me that you don't work on my utility belt anymore. You're done.
Right. And so it's cruel.
Yeah. Oh, it's so cruel. It's so cruel. And honestly, that can even be harder than you leaving them because, I mean, tolerating all that and then getting discarded is really just probably one of the cruelest things I've ever encountered in my life.
And so this is part of the sickness, though, right? Because they view people as objects,
Correct.
right? And so that's why there's the objectification. But
Yeah,
also, isn't it that you're either all good or you're all bad? You can't be a
correct.
good person and do a bad thing. Like, if you do
There's
something,
no
that's why they
way.
can't take the responsibility or the shame, right?
Yeah, there's no gray area. I mean, we're all imperfect. We're all in the gray, right? Like, I don't know, I make 500 mistakes a month. I don't know about you, but they're not really malicious mistakes towards anybody, you know. But no, they you're now you're in the all bad bucket. You're all bad. We're done. You're useless. You're all bad. I have no, you're out of here. And then that's it. Then they move on to the next. I always say that women to them, like they might as well just put them on a conveyor belt. I'll pick this one. I'll pick this one. You know, it's like,
Oh my God. But like, how can somebody spot the red flags today if they are dating?
yeah, right. And so that's why I have all those fun little checklists in the book, right? I have a pathological lover checklist, which is also as a assessment on my website that people could take online because I want them to have quick, easy things. Does he say his ex is the craziest person in the world? Why is she crazy? Does he plow through your boundaries? Do you notice that the insults come? Do you notice that words aren't matching actions? Do you notice the substance abuse disorder that seems a little too much? Um, these are all things that you need to look out for because if there's enough of them in there, then you're probably dealing with a pathological person. And the thing about love is that in the beginning, there's so much dopamine and there's so much euphoria, and we're wired for connection that it can be so. That's why love is blind. It can be so easy to overlook the red flags when you're feeling all of these euphoric feelings, right? But if your gut is saying, uh-oh, listen to it. Get inquisitive. Become curious. That's okay. Dig deeper. Don't take everything at face value.
And so you're having the red flags. Maybe they try to control what you wear.
Right. Well, my first boyfriend was what lipstick color?
You what?
My first boyfriend, he would wipe the lipstick off my face.
Okay, yeah, it's very controlling, right?
Very controlling, yes.
And they want to like control where you work or what you wear or who you're around.
Yes.
Um, and isn't that all part of then it's destabilizing you? It's taking away your strength because you get
Yeah.
strength in these things so that
Yeah.
they can be the
Yeah.
person.
They can be the almighty, whatever they want to be. Yeah. Yeah. Well, again, that you can't have autonomy, you can't have agency because you're not a person.
Oh my
You
gosh,
have to,
because you're an object.
you have to be exactly the way I want you to be.
And give up all of your autonomy and every piece of yourself.
Yeah. You have to give up your identity to keep the couple's identity. And that's, as we know, as that's not healthy love.
And how do you help women to that have lost themselves and lost their identity because they just kept on submitting? Maybe they had some kind of mistaken religious beliefs and they just kept giving and submitting and giving every piece so they don't even know who they are anymore.
Yeah, that's the tricky part. That is hard. But again, you're so obsessed with that person. So I always say, turn the mirror back on you. Who are you? What do you need? What are your values? In the book, I have a relational manifesto that I suggest people write up, like relational rules. What are your personality traits? What are your attachment patterns? And really get to know themselves again. Get very curious without judgment. And then support them in taking little steps and having the courage to face what they fear. Because you're very afraid when you come out of this, and rightly so. And life is scary in general anyway. So really holding them accountable and saying, okay, this week we're going to face this fear. Because you can't build confidence if you don't face your fears. You can't go to Costco and buy it at the store. I'd like that big jug of confidence, please. I'll take two, right? Can't do it. So, helping them get curious, get to know themselves again, and then really supporting them to face their fears.
And so the fears, I would just say some of them dispel them out today. Uh, well, they're afraid something might happen to them on the way out.
Worse.
That could be, and they're afraid of losing everything,
Or
afraid of being alone,
afraid of dating again.
afraid of, am I going to find anyone? And are they
Right,
going to all be like this?
right,
Right.
right, yeah.
And I would say, afraid, can I make it on my own if they've been, because they've been stripped of everything. So
Of
their confidence and their self-esteem, I'm sure, has taken a dive.
Yeah, because they're riddled with self-doubt because they've internalized all the disparaging, insulting comments that the partner has made that aren't true, that
So,
aren't.
oh my gosh, it's just so much, isn't it? And I think finding a therapist
Yes,
like you, or do you have any group programs?
I do. I have a group that I'm just starting, a community. It's trauma bond recovery group. And what I say too when I do these podcasts is I say, Mr. Rogers, some of your young people might not know who he is, but he always said, look for the helpers. The helpers are out there. I work with these women and they are so friggin' resourceful. They find things that I don't even know about. They're teaching me,
That's awesome.
about free legal services, about this, about that. They're smart.
And that's the thing. It's the person didn't hook up to them because they weren't worth anything.
Exactly. 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 So, yeah. So, resilience cannot be built in isolation. We have to reach out to others for help. And it's okay. We need each other. And the resources are there, the support's there. Just us having this conversation, right, is so important if one person hears it.
Right. One person. And look at you. You escaped a horrible thing, truly. You guys could watch that movie and you'll see uh, part of Nadine's life on the screen. But just recognizing that that was horrific. You made it out,
Yeah.
and here you are, and you're happily married 25 years.
Yeah, yeah. And my kids are doing great. My daughter's a therapist. My son's a musician. My daughter just had a baby, so we have a year-old grandson, and my stepdaughter had a grandson, and I'm doing what I love. And that doesn't mean life doesn't throw us stuff. I mean, no matter who we are, life is a pain in the ass, right? But if you keep educating yourself and going to therapy and you build resilience, just get better at it. It's possible. That's all I'm going to say. It is possible.
And I think that's the biggest message that people really need to hear, that it's possible to get out of your situation and move on to big, better
A,
things. Like,
a better, healthier, safer,
yeah,
more,
healthier.
more
Yeah.
peaceful life. It's there.
Well, I have so enjoyed having you on. I just think you're such a gem. I love listening to you talk about helping the women, because I can just see the compassion, the sincerity, the greatness that you've developed to really help people that the situation you were once in. So to me, that's commendable.
Thank you.
Where can everyone find your book? Say the title for everyone
Yeah,
again.
so the name of my book is Run Like Hell.
That's a good
My
one.
editor, my publicist came up with that, not me. I can't take credit for it. And at first I was like, I don't think it's academic enough. And then I was like, no, no, it's so a therapist guide to recognizing, escaping, and healing from trauma bonds. Find me on Instagram, The Real Dr. Nadine. I post every single day. I read all my own direct messages because I love my community so much. And my kids are gone, so I have free time. And I'm on TikTok, the Wild West of social media, Dr. Nay LMFT, and drnay.com. Go to my website, take all the assessments, use the meditations, use the free resources. And just thank you so much for having me on, Linda.
Oh, so great, so great. And I'm sure everybody is going to get a lot of good out of this. Make sure you guys go and check out Dr. Nay's resources. I will say I really love your videos that you put up on Instagram. Those are really great.
Nice.
And it's a learning, I think it's just a learning experience all
Yes,
throughout.
yeah,
So any way you can empower yourself is always the best
good.
thing. Yes, right?
Yep, yep.
Always good. Well, thank you. And thanks everybody for listening to this episode of the Sisterhood of Sweat. Please give us a star review on Instagram and Apple. And also let us know what resonated with you. DM me at Sisterhood of Sweat if you have any questions. And as always, you guys keep on keeping on. Bye, everyone.